Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm Anna Papagrigoraiki on behalf of the European Bioeconomy Alliance, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's online event of the European Parliament Intergroup on Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, where we'll be discussing about empowering the circular bioeconomy through the EU Green Deal. So in today's event, we will actually explore the synergies between the Circular Economy Action Plan and the European bioeconomy strategy, in a way. Let's just say that we would like to leave the questions for you, ladies and gentlemen. You will have a dedicated Q&A session for that. So please remember to actually put your questions in the chat box. And also before the kickoff, so before we start this discussion today, I would like to take the opportunity to thank Honourable Member Mr. Franc Bogovič for actually taking the lead in this event. So prior to passing the floor to Mr. Franc Bogovič, I would also like to tell you that when you actually have a question, please mention to whom it actually is. So mention the name of the panelist if you can. So if you can indicate the speaker to whom your question is best addressed, then we can actually facilitate the fruitful discussion to follow. So now I would like to introduce Honorary Member Mr. Franc Bogovič. So Mr. Franc Bogovič is a member of the European Parliament for the group of the European People's Party. So before that, he was elected member of the National Parliament the Republic of Slovenia 2 consecutive times, and he was the Minister of Agriculture and Environment in the 10th government of the Republic of Slovenia. Mr. Bogovič, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna, and good afternoon to everybody on today's webinar. I'm honored that I can host this webinar of our intergroup on climate change, biodiversity and sustainable development. We all know that we live in a very interesting time, that in Europe we speak a lot about new financial perspective. We also, as answer to COVID crisis, we accept many measures in Next Generation EU, Resilient and Recovery Fund. All we know that Europe is the front runner in Paris Agreement, and our Green Deal is as a holistic agenda for all of us. In different policies, we accept many other strategies like Farm to Fork strategy, biodiversity strategy. For me, it's also very important that Commissioner Šuica and Commissioner Ferreira and Wojciechowski, they prepare a long-term vision for rural areas. It should be presented in June. And all this, when we speak about all these big programs, when we speak about money, we always must have in mind all 3 pillars of sustainability: environmental, social, and economic part of sustainability. And when we come to bioeconomy, we can touch all these things. It's very important that when we speak about common agriculture policy, biodiversity policy, also when we speak about farm to fork policy and other these strategies, that really we take in account on all 3 pillars. It means that we will take care for environment, that we will ensure new jobs. We know that in bioeconomy, we expect that it's possible to create 400,000 new green jobs by 2030. It's a lot of possibility with our forests, either on one side for sink of the carbon, for use of forests as a way where we can collect and store quality water, or in the place when we take care for biodiversity. But on the other side, the forestry and also wooden industry, it's very important for the jobs in the rural areas. We can go through different pillars if we speak about energy, if we speak about building material, if we speak about isolation material, we are always very close to forests and to use of wooden biomass. We know that there is this cascade use, that it's the whole trees are not for use for energy, but we must first do everything with the wood, what is possible that we do before, at the end, for the low quality wood or use for the energy. So I think that it's really very important that we debate about this, that at the end of the day, we recognize that, as I said, all three pillars are very important, and that we find the compromises which are sometimes necessary, but these compromises cannot go neither in the direction that we damage the nature, or another side that we lose jobs. So I think there are many opportunities. I'm very, very glad that in today webinar we have distinguished guests from John Bell from the European Commission. There are people from European Bioeconomy Alliance, people from European Forest Institute, and also European Regional Office, and especially greetings to my colleagues Simon, Asker, Ulrike, and Eero. I'm very glad that I am in such a great company with other colleagues, with distinguished guests, and I'm sure that we will have excellent debate. So that's enough for the beginning. I wish you a fruitful debate, and at the end of this webinar, I will also try to make some conclusions. Thanks, Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bogovič, and it's particularly appreciated that you mentioned the three different pillars of sustainability, because that is where the bioeconomy will also be an added value. So I'd like to call in the next speaker, and this is Mr. John Bell. So John Bell is the Director on Healthy Planet at the Director General for Research and Innovation, DGRTD, of the European Commission. And previously, Mr. Bell was Director for Bioeconomy in the same DG, focusing on policy and initiatives related to bio-based industry, sustainable bioeconomy, agriculture, and the food sector. Mr. Bell, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Deputy Bogovič and Anna and colleagues. I should start by, it is the greenest of green days today. It's St. Patrick's Day, and I'd like to wish you all Loyal Fáilig in Ireland. In the lockdown, we're calling this on St. Patrick's Day because you can't meet anybody, you can't party, you can't dance, you can't drink. But at least we can do something green in our session this afternoon. So as Anna has said, I'm John Bell. I'm Director of Healthy Planet and Research Innovation Department of the Commission. And my job is actually to work together with those who are bringing research and innovation to drive this great transition that the European Green Deal places in front of us. And I have a few messages basically in what I'm trying to say here today. So number one is the European Green Deal is the new frame. It's a constitutional shift in the political economy. It's what the European Union is for. It's about getting to climate neutrality, working within planetary boundaries, and building a fair and inclusive economy. And it will shape all of the work that we do for the next 30 years. For the Green Deal to happen, the economy has to go circular. For the circular economy, for the economy to go circular, the bioeconomy must be made to be sustainable within boundaries, localized, ruralized, innovative and fair. So the circular bioeconomy is central to the success of the European Green Deal, and the use and mobilization of innovation, rural and other policies to make it happen on the ground is the critical next step, and that's where research and innovation has to step in. So that's more or less what I'll be saying here. And I know that Claire Scantlebury, Laura Hetemaki, and Luke Moss will come in with greater depth and detail in some of the aspects of this. But let's just start with the context. I think it was the Secretary General of the United Nations said the great task of our century is to make peace with nature. If we look at the pandemic is the opening chapter in the century of biology in which we have this great challenge to make peace between the biosphere and the economy. And what the bioeconomy is and where it's moving is the place in which that reconciliation, that peace can be made. European Green Deal's goal of a first climate neutral continent by the 2050 is beyond policy cycles, institutional cycles, investment cycles, political cycles. It is what the European Union is for the next 30 years. And all of the policies that you see rolling out, from the great climate law debate in the Parliament to farm to fork, biodiversity, the circular economy action plan, the industry action plan, zero pollution, all the different elements that are going to make this systemic shift happen, or the massive wall of money that is there to aid a green and digital recovery, are about making this huge shift happen. Now, we think sometimes in boxes when we deal with policies, but when we look at the different parts of those changes, if you look at the climate part, for example, most analysts would have said that of the 7 areas identified in the Clean Planet transformations of decarbonisation, probably the most difficult areas will be the areas that are in the circular bioeconomy, because we're talking about living resources, limited resources, biodiversity, planetary boundary limits, communities whose livelihoods depend on them, and the introduction of different ways and means of developing goods and services in an acceptable way. So for the European Green Deal to happen, one of the great challenges is to make the economy circular so that we can do so much more in terms of dealing with the carbon footprint, creating a different kind of system where we go post-waste, where we go into a renewable society, a renovated economy that's using low carbon recyclable materials, and a fairer society where everybody has access to the distribution of the goods and services that are being made where they live and work, and particularly in terms of the rural economy. So making the economy circular, we'll hear more today about the Circular Economy Action Plan, which is really about the conditions that are needed, whether we're talking about innovation or policy or regulation or taxonomy or standards or investment or skills, to create this new regenerative economy that is renewable, regenerative, resource efficient, and working within boundaries. And within that, and within all the decarbonisation, that where about 1/4 of our greenhouse gases can be reduced if we move to a different system, and if we apply the basic directions of replacing, reusing, recycling. And I note, by the way, that in the Parliament in Australia, there's a big debate going on about the right to repair. There's a whole legislative agenda behind there. What we talk about in terms of the bioeconomy part of the economy that needs to go circular is particularly challenging, because the bioeconomy, which was talking about living resources, which is working within resources that do renew themselves, but not without any conditions, that work within boundaries that are living boundaries, whether we talk about biodiversity itself, or the systems that we need to make sure that we can work in, for example, a post-pesticide, chemical pesticide future, or the impacts that what we're doing have on different parts of the ecosystem or nature, or the way in which the value is generated and shared by those who live and work there in forestry, farming communities, coastal communities, or the industries that need to be transformed. The bioeconomy is going to play a huge role in making that shift to making the economy circular. And it's one of the areas where that is going to be much more difficult. Now, in making that shift, the bioeconomy and a circular bioeconomy will have to become a sustainable circular bioeconomy. And if those great parts of this European Green Deal transformation that need to go circular and need to become decarbonised and need to work within planetary boundaries are going to work in a world of increasing pressure and limited resources, so you will see the different parts of the bioeconomy. Food comes first. If you look at the debate going on around the taxonomy, which I'm sure will come up later on, we need to create the space for us to allow to see how can we move to a post-waste society by creating the right incentives to use waste and residues and other streams. How can we move into new areas where, for example, a lot of our problems can be taken if we deal with the issues of landfill, for example. If we reduce biodegradable waste in landfills by 65%, that's 75 million tons of CO2. So we're going to have to see how can the bioeconomy shift up a gear in terms of the ambition that it has, which is not simply to be what it was a few years ago. The bioeconomy is the original economy that we've all had for thousands of years, where people traded wood and food and forest for value. But the new bioeconomy we've been working on, it started as a place for substitution. It started as a place for defossilization. And now the bioeconomy is going to be probably the most critical area where this great transformation of becoming decarbonized, working within boundaries and going circular is going to happen. And the opportunity, as Franc Bogovič mentioned at the beginning, to bring work and prosperity and regeneration and recovery into parts of the economy that simply are not reached by the current economic model, rural communities, coastal communities, forest communities, regions that are not at the center of the golden technical triangle, is huge. So what we've been doing in the institutions in Europe is to try and see how are we going to make this thing happen. As you'll know, in 2018, the institutions revisited the bioeconomy strategy and produced a new sustainable bioeconomy strategy in 2018, which is moving from broad concepts and ideas to actually shifting into deployment, directing, de-risking investment, demonstrating possibilities and creating the skills to make it happen. So the 2018 strategy is worth looking at again because it's ahead of its game in terms of how we are going to make this Green Deal transition happen and how we go circular in these big parts of the economy, is looking at three major axes or motors: investing in the bio-based sectors that are front and center in making these transitions happen and in making the kind of growth that will be possible in the future, deploying the opportunities of the bioeconomy locally across the European Union. For example, in Central and Eastern Europe, in Southwestern Europe, in parts of Northern Europe, and some of the poorer regions in some of the other parts of Western Europe, there are enormous opportunities here to reinvent value and to reconnect people into skilled employment and value creation, that they can move from being tenants in their own economy to co-creators of the next economy in Europe. And the third priority, which is understanding the ecological boundaries. And I'm sure Luke will talk about this later on. We are living in a world of finite resources and finite boundaries. That's the fundamental insight of the circular economy. The bioeconomy, it can appear that biomass can be generated and changed in different kinds of ways, but there are limits to what biomass can produce, to the stresses that it places on the ecosystems. And there may be new ways of opening up new frontiers for finding feedstock in terms of algae and waste and so forth. But we are living within a living system. And the third part of the sustainable circular bioeconomy is to try and understand what those boundaries actually are and how we're going to interact with that as we build this new treaty between nature and the economy, particularly locally. And so there were 14 actions identified, which you'd be glad to hear. I'm not going to go through one by one. But what they try and do is to work on reskilling. They try and produce the kind of policy support facilities that are necessary for regions and countries that want to make this step forward to plug into the best practice that are there. They bring the member states together in a forum where they can share experiences. There are now bioeconomy strategies in the vast majority of member states and many, many regions. And they can also allow them to plug into the opportunities to make these happen. The great programs that are taking place as we speak on recovery and resilience, the operational programs of the cohesion funds, the rural development programs of the common agricultural policy, where the bioeconomy is one of the 9 critical criteria. And also to look at, how in areas like Central and Eastern Europe, where we have a BioEast initiative, there can be a collective stepping up and a seizing of the opportunity quickly, which can really drive forward both sustainability and decarbonisation. So the circular bioeconomy strategy is now moving into deployment phase, and I think that is going to be critical. But central to that, and this is the last point I will finish on, is the role that innovation and ideas will play in this. And the bio-based transformation that we've seen happen, in which Europe has led for the last now 10 years, is remarkable and very promising. We talk in terms of technologies very often, but the bio-based transformation has moved from finding substitute materials for some of our heaviest and most challenged industries, whether we talk about energy or paper or pulp, construction, so forth, And now what we've seen through the investment that the European Union, the private sector and regions and member states have made is a dramatic transformation in the opportunities and the options that we have to move towards a more sustainable use and a more cascaded use in some cases of the kind of limited feedstocks that we have. So we look at the bio-based transformations, we look at the bio-based industries joint undertaking, for example, where with Philippe Mongal and our colleagues from Matt Quedlik and the colleagues from the Industrial Consortium, there's been a massive exercise in demonstrating at scale and in flagships what could actually happen, what could the signposts be for these transformations. And we're not simply having abstract testing of technology. Right across Europe, you have projects like farming, where we're using mealworms fed with vegetable byproducts as a source of proteins for animal feed, developing replicable kind of models, and that could produce 1,000 indirect jobs. We have a demonstration project trying to address the severity of Xylella, which is wreaking havoc on the economy of Southern Europe in the olive plantations. Or we have these huge flagships, like after Biochem, the biorefinery located in France, producing acids, organic acids, with a mineral fertilizer side stream from byproducts of sugar production. Or Plenitude in the Netherlands, where we use sustainable cereal crops as feedstock for food-grade protein. You know, there's other ones which are like Exilva, that are producing all kinds of new adhesives and so forth from waste streams. And that's not to talk about what's happening in Sardinia or Slovakia and all the rest. So what we've done in the first phase is to test and demonstrate, to build flagships and demonstrators, to encourage policy and to put the opportunities in place. What we now need to see is a systemic stepping up of the role that bio-based innovation, research and technology will take in driving this European Green Deal transformation. So in the renovation way, for example, in the rebuilding effort that will take place, you know, the materials that will be needed for construction, the opportunity to take carbon out, to circularize the construction industry. If we look at the restoration wave that will come, one of the things we have to do with biodiversity collapse and ecosystems collapse is not simply to throw our hands in the air and say, let's not make it worse. We have to restore things. We're going to have to learn how to actually work with ecosystem services, with bio-based ways of working with nature, with restoration services that haven't even been designed yet at scale. The services aspect of the bioeconomy will become very significant as a part of restoring and repairing the damage that has been done on land and sea. So this is one of the reasons why, to conclude, we are moving forward to invest in the bio-based transformation, to make it circular, to make it sustainable. You'll hear about the Circular Bioeconomy Europe public-private partnership, the joint initiative, which is going through its paces with the Council and the institutions as we speak. The goal of that is to take the work we did in the BBI, to mobilize the investment and to move these bio-based opportunities, the technologies, the innovation, the business models, the SMEs, and the new services opportunities, and move it forward so that they can de-risk, that they can de-risk investments, so they can be scaled up, that we can have European leaders, they can demonstrate the potential, and so that we can roll them out in different parts of Europe and different parts of the world. They can distribute the economic opportunity more fairly. So bringing rural economies in, bringing the actors in who are stewards of the biomass and so forth to be part of the prosperity. And of course, to democratize the process, to make the situations that we're dealing with more locally based, more accountable, more integrated in the parts of the economy that need to recover. You'll see in the European Union's research innovation program, Horizon Europe, that there's a huge space for a sustainable circular bioeconomy in cluster, what we call cluster 6 of Horizon Europe. You'd have seen we launched a €1 billion European Green Deal call, looking to have research innovation, not just observing and gathering evidence, but setting direction and making change possible, which will be very exciting when that comes in later in the year. There are new initiatives on circular cities where the bioeconomy is active. There's a €250 million circular bioeconomy fund, which we've developed jointly with the EIB. So it's all moving. We're coming to the moment to deploy, to demonstrate, to de-risk, to democratize, to distribute and disseminate. And I think it's a good moment to have this conversation, because The bioeconomy is going to go from being a word and a concept where we talk about the bioeconomy to a future when we get the European Green Deal, we will be living in a bioeconomy, a different and wider concept in which we have made peace between nature and the economy, and between the economy and society, and between the economy and society and the needs of the planet. So it's a great moment to have this discussion. Thank you for the privilege and the opportunity to speak. And I think we're at a very promising moment where the most difficult aspects of the Green Deal transformation and the most opportune moments for investment in recovery will mean that the bioeconomy will be one of those areas where, when we look to the future, we can see an opportunity to move from these lockdowns into breakthroughs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bell. I think this was a very inspiring speech, despite the fact that you be able to be doing dancing and drinking. What's great to hear is that the bioeconomy strategy from 2018 is more valid than ever, and it should make peace between the biosphere and the biomass resources, of course, within the limits of the ecosystem. It also is great that you see that the bioeconomy will be everywhere, so there will be a democratization of the bioeconomy, and that innovation will be taken forward. So now let's take a look into the industry, and I would like to welcome Claire Skentelberry, who is Director General at EuropaBio, the European Association for Bioindustries. So Dr. Skentelberry holds a PhD in biochemistry and has worked in the development of scientific networks and associations for over 15 years. During her career, she has been Secretary General for the European Biotechnology Network and Director General of the Nanotechnology Industries Association. So, Dr. Skentelberry, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I hope that you can hear me okay. Perfect. So thank you very much indeed for the invitation to speak at today's meeting, and it really means a lot, because for me, biotechnology has always been an incredibly revolutionary technology for my entire career, and so it's wonderful to see it taking center stage within the transition that we really need to undertake into a bioeconomy as part of creating a sustainable and circular economy. So I'm the Director General of EuropaBio, and many of you will know we are an association that represents biotechnology across all sectors, but I'm speaking today on behalf of the European Bioeconomy Alliance, EUBA, which represents a diverse, very much interconnected family of associations for primary producers, processors, and technology providers that are active within bioeconomy development. As is the case across many advanced sciences, the technology itself is not actually the bottleneck that we are addressing. It's the framework and the ecosystem that shapes the way it is delivered to the market, consumer, and to the environment. And this is really the focus of the presentation today. The Alliance came together in 2015 to highlight the significant role of the sectors that it represents in delivering bioeconomy solutions for, as I've already said, the essential transition into a circular and bioeconomy. And the targets of the Alliance to achieve include production and use of renewable resources as a feedstock for innovative and value-added materials in everyday products and processes, but not just novel products, but translating existing products into having a bio-based composition, normalizing a bio-based element to everything that we have. We would also like to maximize the unused potential of European renewable resources. And this really encourages the production of bio-based products and materials locally, made in Europe. So you see the competitive benefit, you see the economic, and you see the environmental benefit really directly. And finally, our ambition is also to achieve resource efficiency and sustainability as principles that drive business strategy and investment. And Europe's bioeconomy is already a very serious business. There are over 29 million employees represented across the EUBA sectors, and that includes materials of all types used in all applications. So it's an incredibly broad base from which to build further. And globally, when you look at this from an economic perspective, the bioeconomy is changing substantially already, and we're going to see it grow very significantly. So, and that's worldwide. within Europe, the Green Deal and the industrial strategy are really focusing the mind of companies of how they invest in the long term for sustainable growth. And the question really is, how is Europe going to enable them to do this with the policy and regulatory framework that it develops? And indeed, talking to our own members at Europa Bio, and not just those involved in bioeconomy-based technologies, but all of our members across healthcare as well, they're all talking about how they achieve a sustainable footprint within Europe. And so it's really exciting that the bio-based economy can help them achieve that. So it's all industry investing and planning towards this. So the audience is there to make these changes. So before I move on to my next slide, I would just wrap that up by saying it's super important for Europe that we achieve our carbon neutral ambitions within our own competitive European economy. The world is moving. Can we move with it to help deliver the solutions? So I'm going to take a quick look at the synergies between sort of circular and bioeconomy. And this is a somewhat busy slide from the MacArthur Foundation, but it tries to demonstrate how circularity and bioeconomy sit side by side. They are not the same thing. They have very strong links, and in everyday applications and also in policy. So, for example, a few policy links include food waste, biomass, bio-based products as areas of policy intervention. And both the policy agendas for circularity and bioeconomy converge with respect to economic and environmental concerns, plus R&D and societal transition towards sustainability. So they are very much interconnected. And you can see this as well. You can see your progress towards policy driving a sustainable outcome, because there are a number of different policies that have developed over the years. Obviously, we sit within a global policy perspective as well now, with the Paris Accord very much focusing countries from all over the world towards becoming carbon neutral. And Europe, as you can see here, has developed a number of strategies and policy plans and will continue to do so. And the key thing for bioeconomy is that it's cross-cutting, it's not sector specific. So where we see bioeconomy policies coming into play in different sectors, what we'd really like to understand is how they can align so that we're not pulling in two different directions to achieve our desired outcomes. And then it's going to be much faster and much more positive to move forward with the bioeconomy across multiple sectors. So I'm moving now to the main points of my presentation, which are really to present the EUBA position paper around the Circular Economy Action Plan. And delivering the fullest impact of this action plan really needs to enable maximum engagement from sectors from across the bioeconomy industry in Europe. And we have a series of recommendations to help this to happen. And as I've already said, industry is ready and wanting to do this very much indeed. And they're doing as much as they already can within the policy and regulatory framework that Europe already has. You know, and as an alliance, we also support the Commission's focus on key product value chains and would really like to make some sectoral contributions as well. And these can be used as examples. So the two I have here are linked to construction and buildings and plastics, but they throw up issues and opportunities that come up across all different sectors. So if we look at construction first, so one such step within construction are initiatives such as the renovation wave strategy that's already been mentioned, and the circular economy principles for building design. These promote energy efficient buildings using bio-based materials and nature-based solutions, as well as facilitating uptake and providing market stimulation measures. And as you'll see, as we come back to time and time again, it's addressing all aspects of the pathway to market, including investment, intellectual property, regulation. All of these things help technologies move forwards, and so they all have to be in place. Within the sustainable product policy framework, further impetus could including the scope of the eco design initiative to allow additional products such as textiles and other bio-based products to be considered. So these frameworks should not be static. They should always be moving forward with what new bio-based materials they can bring in to achieve their goals. Another step is building with sustainable and responsibly sourced wood. This has been recognised again in the renovation wave strategy, as well as the climate target plan of 2030. And finally, the use of bio-based insulation materials may address many concerns related to energy efficiency and environmental impact. This should go hand in hand with ambitious and sustained calls for research and innovation. There are significant gains to be achieved within construction, and the use of natural bio-based insulation from materials, for example, has increased in recent years, largely driven by the concerns over the embodied energy and whole life environmental impact of insulation materials. If we then move across to plastics, a topic familiar to many people for lots of different reasons, the Commission aims to propose legislative waste reform and consider actions in the field of bio-based and biodegradable plastics. It's very important to realise that alternative feedstocks, such as bio-based and renewable feedstocks, can help decrease the dependency of the plastics industry on petrochemicals. And this contributes towards the EU's climate adaptation and mitigation targets and enables industry to move investment into more sustainable practice. The benefits of developing responsibly sourced renewable materials into bio-based products should be considered as equal value to the incorporation of recycled content when developing future initiatives on packaging, agriculture and waste. And as gaps appear from the inevitable loss of materials from a circular process, those gaps should be filled with bio-based materials. The transition needs to be driven continuously and take all opportunities. Biodegradable and compostable plastics in the collection and recycling of food waste and subsequent production of high quality compost should also be considered as essential in helping achieve Europe's ambitious targets for recovery of organic waste and its diversion away from landfill by the end of 2023. And that, of course, is not very far away now. So we really need to move towards that. And revision of the essential requirements for the Packaging and Policy Waste Directive and in the development of a policy framework for bioplastics should also consider the role of benefits from bioplastics. The use of biodegradable and compostable products in agriculture should also be enabled in compliance with existing standards. And this brings us inevitably for sectors to the talk of level playing field. It's absolutely essential for ecosystem development within Europe. When the European Commission talks the talk, which we all support and all want to help achieve, the companies are the ones that will need to walk the walk, and the ecosystem is the pathway upon which they will walk. So it's incredibly important for that ecosystem to be right to enable industry to make long-term investments and decisions. That brings us to our next absolutely critical point, which is engaging industry and empowering consumers. So around the sustainable product policy framework, this is absolutely essential, and this links very much to the previous comment around level playing field. Strong policy signals, measures and incentives are critical to engage industry in their investment into smarter products, processes and partnerships, and making the renewability of their raw materials an asset rather than a burden. And industry is essential throughout the value chain, right from the beginning of materials development to its recycling and disposal, to promote bio-based products visibility and stimulate market demand across lots of sectors. And the number of sectors in which you could apply these to is almost infinite. You're talking about packaging, automotive, coatings, construction, there's an endless list. And some of these industries will move faster than others. So this is not something that will happen overnight, but needs consistency of policy and messaging and regulatory framework. And the citizen engagement is absolutely critical. We are all citizens and we all actively need to drive this. And we know that consumers can make or break technology. And in this case, societal changes are essential if we are truly to deliver the circular and bioeconomy revolution that we are working towards. So all parties need to raise awareness of existing renewable alternatives to fossil carbon-based products and enhance consumption of sustainable products and sustainable production methods. A clear way to do this is with excellent certification and labelling systems. And we can do that based on European standards, which enables the clear communication of bio-based products in an unambiguous way. And going beyond labelling and consumer roles, give a clear preference within procurement and taxation systems towards products where renewable materials were used. Use any single tool you can to try and incentivize and pull these materials into the economy. And so we now turn to the taxonomy regulation that is currently being developed. The regulation has identified the transition to a circular economy as one of the 6 environmental objectives. Bio-based products have a very strong potential to enable this transition, and the bioeconomy sector can provide benchmark cases for circular thinking, and synergies can be very much identified between the 2 policy areas. However, currently the technical screening criteria included are an oversimplification of the argument for food versus fuels materials. The either-or argument is very reductive and divisive, and it's not accurate, given the rapid advance of technology since the early days of products such as biofuels, which were many decades ago now. EUBA's members seek to, and in fact are increasingly able to, extract value from every fraction of a given feedstock, including those that might previously have been regarded as waste residues. And this allows the creation of a very broad spectrum of beneficial products. We therefore strongly suggest that the technical screening criteria for bio-based products is aligned to the widely accepted and upheld EU feedstock sustainability criteria that is already in place in the EU. So as I wrap up my talk, we take a look to the future, and we welcome the fact that these policies bring a very strong long-term foundation for industrial development. And really, when you look at circular and bioeconomies, they're really intertwined. And so they are essential to view in alignment so they can both pull together for maximum output. We also very much welcome the commitment to supporting a sustainable and circular economy through the Bioeconomy Action Plan. And the 14 measures within the Bioeconomy Action Plan of 2018 are instrumental in delivering this alignment. So I would like to say thank you to you all, and emphasize again how significant industry commitment is to delivering a circular and sustainable bioeconomy. And policy and regulatory frameworks are at the absolute core of delivering this change. And Europe should be the enabler of its industry to deliver this, rather than a consumer of the technologies and products that have been matured elsewhere. We are all ready to do this and be part of the future of Europe in a sustainable world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Claire. And I think what's quite important is to see industry commitment for actually showing the synergies between the circular economy and the bioeconomy. So you have mentioned a few things like the Sustainable Products Initiative, Packaging Waste Directive, and you've also mentioned about using every part of the raw material for a range of bio-based products in diverse sectors.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Excellent. So now we shall link it with our next speaker, which is Mr. Lauri Hetemäki, I hope I pronounced it correctly, who is actually the Assistant Director at the European Forest Institute, where he is responsible for the Institute's science policy work. Moreover, Dr. Hetemäki is also working as Professor of Practice at the University of Helsinki. So, Mr. Hetemäki, Dr. Hetemäki, excuse me, the floor is yours, and let's see what science is doing.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can see the slides and hear me. Is that the case? Can somebody confirm?
Yes.
Okay, great. So today I will be addressing 2 issues. The organizers of this forum asked me to introduce what is called the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance. So that is the first part of my talk. In the second part, I will give some personal comments regarding the connection of Green Deal and the forest bioeconomy. The Circular Bioeconomy Alliance was established by His Royal Highness Prince of Wales last year. It is part of his Sustainable Markets initiative that was launched in Davos last year also. The alliance is facilitated and coordinated by European Forest Institute, and the coordinator is the director of EFI, who you see in the slide shaking hands with the Prince. What is really interesting with this alliance is its members. It includes a number of members from very diverse sectors. It has global companies that are involved with forest industry or pharma sector. It has banks, it has innovation funds, it has organization involved with environmental sustainability. It has small and medium scale companies involved, for example, forest restoration. And I think it is really this pollinating between this diverse set of organization that is key of the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance. The main aim of the Alliance is to accelerate the transition to a circular bioeconomy that is in harmony with nature and prospers, inclusively engaging the society. It is also based on science information, and this is really the part of European Forest Institute and its member organizations providing the science content for this alliance. The other part of the alliance is connecting investors to new investable solutions. The activities of the alliance is based on an action plan that was published last year, and you see in the slide the publication, which is freely downloadable, and since these slides will be shared to you, you can read more closely what the publication is about. But basically, some of the main activities of this alliance are catalyzing investment and connecting investors to start-up and scale-up projects on circular bioeconomy, supporting governments and investors to develop informed strategies and investments on circular bioeconomy. So it's really also about information sharing and capacity building. It's also very hands-on by demonstrating some potential circular bioeconomy pilot cases and training models, and I will shortly list some examples. And there is intention to accelerate land restoration initiatives online with the African Forest Landscape Restoration Initiative. To take some examples of this only less than 1 year old alliance, the very old Swiss bank Lombard Odier started in the end of last year a new natural capital fund that currently amounts to about $580 million, and it is investing especially on circular bioeconomy related investment opportunities, and it was inspired by the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance Action Plan. There are several pilot projects ongoing that are aiming at accelerating land restoration, especially in Africa, in Rwanda, Ghana, Mozambique, and also in Peru in South America. Circular bioeconomy is often related to rural areas, but the way that the alliance is also that it is very important in the cities where most of the world people live. And it's demonstrating how we can build more greener cities, and also whether it's building houses or whether it's the forest in the cities and so on, and it's building capacity for more greener cities. So 3 very different type of activities that the alliance is already engaged in. So that was the short introduction for the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance, and then some comments regarding the Green Deal and the forest bioeconomy. The way that the Green Deal, the original document from 2019, saw the bioeconomy was not very detailed. I'm really happy that John Bell in his speech highlighted the importance of the EU bioeconomy strategy, because it was hardly mentioned in the Green Deal document from 2019. But I now see that there is in the Commission much more understanding that it needs to be part of this Green Deal. In the Green Deal, it originally saw forests rather narrow, only from in terms of zinc and biodiversity. And there were very few statements on the multiple benefits forests can provide to society. And I think EU forest-based sector can be contributing to Green Deal much strongly than is seen in the original document. Especially this is important now in the post-COVID situation. If we just look at the Green Deal and the climate mitigation and how the Green Deal sees the role of the forest-based sector, in this slide I have listed several different categories through which the European Union forest-based sector can contribute to climate mitigation. And the Green Deal has so far very much focused on the carbon sequestration to trees and soil, so the forest sink, and not really address the other channels. For example, in order to keep this forest carbon sink in the future, it is really crucial to adapt the European forest to changing climate, because otherwise there is a danger that we are losing some of that sink capacity. So this adaptation thing needs to be addressed much more in detail than it has been so far. In terms of reaching the carbon neutrality in European Union, the blue part, the substitution part, is really key, because whatever else we do, but not phase out the fossils, we will not reach the carbon neutrality. So phasing out the fossil is the key. And here I would like to stress that it is as important to phase out the so-called short-living fossil-based products, like for example, food packaging or textile, as it is the long-living products like buildings. Oftentimes you hear that you should use wood for the long-living products because the long-living products store carbon for a longer time. But I think this is in a sense not an optimal thing, because the world will not stop using short-living products, and we need to phase out fossil-based short-living products as well. So the Green Deal should really see all the different channels to which the forest-based sector can contribute to the climate mitigation. So that is really key. I'm happy that the European Commission is acknowledging more today than in 2019 the role of the EU forest bioeconomy in this. Just yesterday, the Commissioner for DG Environment stressed the importance of seeing the forest-based sector in a holistic way, also acknowledging the role of bioeconomy. And I think this is a very welcome situation. To summarize my key points, the Green Deal calls on climate neutrality and resource efficiency cannot be met without also a new range of bio-based solutions. They have to be part of the solution. In the past, it was the missing link in the Green Deal, but now I'm much more optimistic that it will not be that in the future. The forest-based sector can do much more in creating synergies and address holistically climate, biodiversity, economic and social objectives than the original 2019 proposal. And especially for the post-COVID situation, we cannot do without also circular bioeconomy being part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Lauri. And I think what's quite important here is that you've added a missing part of the puzzle, which was mentioned also in the yesterday event of Politico, which is the forest strategy. But I think what's also quite important here is that the bio-based solutions will also be the key for resource efficiency and climate neutrality. And science is actually the glue between industry and policymakers. But I now see that the next speaker is ready to present. So without further ado, we have Luc Bass, who is the European Regional Director for the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, otherwise known as IUCN. Prior to that, Mr. Bass was European Director of the Climate Group in Brussels, working with business and government to achieve a more ambitious EU climate policy. So climate neutrality is nothing new to you, Luc, and I can also see that you're making the link with the UN SDGs. I love the background poster. Please tell us more.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for inviting me to be part of this important debate. And also the opportunity that the bioeconomy sector does offer to be part of the solution of where we need to end and to help implement actually the Green Deal and all its parts, from the farm to fork strategy to the biodiversity strategy. So there is a role to play. Of course, when we look at bioeconomy, one would think or could think that circular would not be needed to be put in front, because by definition a bioeconomy should be circular, because one could claim it's not a bioeconomy if it is not circular. So just to be a bit provocative here. But on the other hand, we do know that there is a risk for unsustainable bioeconomy, and we all know that we had a very successful unsustainable bioeconomy in the Middle Ages, or in the late Middle Ages, where we actually cut almost all forest in Europe or in Western Europe. So there is, of course, a risk of the total use and the total limits that exist. And I think John Bell also referred to that we have to be clear in trying to define what these limits are, because otherwise the solution might just end up in becoming a problem. And that, of course, is not what we really want. So yes, it's an important part. Yes, IUCN is part of the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance just for these reasons, because we believe the bioeconomy can play an important role in helping us solve. There's just a few things I wanted to highlight in regard to the reference to nature-based solutions that is very often made. The use of wood in construction, for example, is an interesting solution, and it can have an incredibly beneficial effects if smartly used, but it's not per definition a nature-based solution, because we have to look at what the nature-based solution can achieve and should achieve. And one of the elements that I haven't heard that much, I was happy to hear EFI have mentioned biodiversity at least once, but we need to have a net positive effect on biodiversity to call a solution a nature-based solution. That's one criterion. The other criteria are that they contribute to societal challenge. And this is where IUCN always makes the connection to the economy and to the social needs and to well-being. And so we will continue to do that. And if you look at the global standard that IUCN has developed, and we hope will inspire the EU and many others to make sure that the criteria of these nature-based solutions are being lived up to, can clearly show that there is this dual importance of people and nature. But we need to win on both. And I just wanted to make one, and I have this slide in the back of me, because I think we really need to start, or maybe stop talking about the three pillars of sustainable development, because the social pillar and the economic pillar wouldn't even exist if the foundation of a healthy ecosystem wouldn't be assured. So I think the SDGs, as they're put in the back of my video here, with the basics, our ecosystems, the social context, civil society, the society at large, and then ultimately an economy that serves the society and not society serving an economy, is really summing it all up. So if we look at the use of biomass at large, the cascading principle that has been mentioned before, there is quite some unease with that cascading principle, because sometimes it's been seen as hampering a development and then a real scaling up of a bioeconomy, but it remains important. The Renewable Energy Directive needs these new sustainable criteria to make sure that the forest biomass is being used, if it's at all being used for energy, it's done very wisely and carefully. But even the European Commission report concludes that most of the forest biomass that we burn for energy actually produces more greenhouse gas emissions than coal and oil and gas, which is, of course, not really what we want. Yes, we need to get rid of our fossil-based energy system, but let's be careful with replacing it with biomass, and we all know that remains a risk. Of course, sustainable forest management is key. I think this is part of assuring a healthy sector, because much of that bioeconomy sector is, of course, based on products out of the forest. But yeah, sustainable forest management to achieve the EU biodiversity strategy is a bare minimum, and we have to allow a discussion on where we see non-intervention and what does a bioeconomy of non-intervention mean? Meaning you need to account for the services that the biosphere delivers to us. And there is hope on this natural capital accounting, which is important, I think, for the businesses to also see a business case to invest in nature per se, in the ecosystems, in the restoration, in the protection. And that is the accounting system that was agreed at the UN level recently, where the European Commission had an important input, and where I know that we've been informed that the Commission now will also bring this to the economic accounting model in the EU itself. And that could open big opportunities for a bioeconomy that is not necessarily only based on the biomaterials, and could also look into this in a broader way. I mentioned the Farm to Fork strategy just before. This, of course, is an important part of contribution. The Circular Economy Action Plan, as mentioned by John Bell earlier, I think is also a very important part. And I think we need a really sustainable EU bioeconomy that indeed will provide beautiful business and job opportunities. And one of the biggest wins, of course, could be to make a smart use of the food waste, the enormous amount of food waste that we're still producing, that we should reduce, but as long as it is there, it should also be used wisely, and that is another beautiful opportunity. Horizon Europe, of course, is putting a lot of funding against more research in the context of fisheries, agriculture, and the digital technologies that go with it. Also nature-based solutions for agri-food. So again, we hope that IUCN standard will be used as widely as possible. The 10-point action plan that was mentioned earlier by EFI is one that I was happy to contribute to, and we are happy to also see that there is a clear reference to investment in nature and biodiversity. And I wanted to just highlight one element of a new initiative of our new Director General, who is focusing on a nature-based recovery initiative that is aiming at having 10% of all the investments in the stimulus packages, and of course, hopefully also in future budgets, would be channeled to protect and restore nature or to implement nature-based solutions. And this is something that is done on a global level, and of course, we have to translate this to the European level, where we are again happy to see that the Council and the Parliament agreed for the spending towards nature and biodiversity positive action in 26. So that's clearly Europe leading, and we're happy to see that at least the plan is there. Let's now hope that it really happens. Maybe I'll just wrap up by saying that the bioeconomy, a sustainable bioeconomy that per definition should be circular, is an important contribution to a socioeconomic and ecological paradigm. I think the industry can really help change the paradigm. We need to measure things differently to give even more room for a successful bioeconomy. So I think there we are clearly partners. The biodiversity strategy and the forest strategy and the farm to fork strategy, they can only be implemented when we have all the stakeholders on board, the industry, the bioeconomy industry, and of course all the landowners and those that are directly involved with how the land will be used to provide the material and the raw material to the bioeconomy. So let's make sure that this bioeconomy is sustainable, that it is happening within the boundaries that we are well aware of, but that can be better defined, as was said earlier by the European Commission. But let's be clear that there are limits to the growth in the bioeconomy if we want to secure our natural environment. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Luc. This was very clear, and I think what I'd like to highlight here from your speech is that biomass, or that there is no, if a solution has to be called a nature-based solution, then it has to have a net positive influence on biodiversity, but also contribute to social challenges. There is a link with the UN SDGs, but at the same time, what you're also mentioning is the collaboration across the value chain, including the agricultural owners, forest owners, and there is also a link with the farm to fork strategy, besides the circular economy action plan. What's important is that for sustainable forest management should be the bare minimum for the bioeconomy to be a success. And at the same time, the sustainability of the bioeconomy has to prevail for it to continue. And this also means using residues, which was also mentioned by the previous speakers, including food waste. And I think you've made a link which the other speakers have also made, and I forgot to mention before, it is with the renovation wave, with construction, and I do smell also the European Bauhaus. Thank you very much. Now, we shall give the floor to the MEPs, and in particular, we have 4 MEPs with us that will actually tell us how to actually boost the bioeconomy in the Green Deal, how to boost it further. What is their view? And the first MEP that we will actually call is Simone Schmidbauer. So Simone Schmidbauer is a member of the European Parliament for the group of the European People's Party. Prior to joining the European Parliament, Mrs. Schmidbauer served as mayor of the town of Hintendorf, and she has been deputy chairwoman of the Farmers Union in Styria, Austria. So, Mrs. Schmidbauer, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Dear Chair, hello Franz, dear speakers, dear colleagues, dear participants of today's online event. First, I'm very happy and honored to be here with you today because I find today's topic of utmost importance and very much at place with the challenges we face in the times we live. I want to thank our great speakers today who gave us so much food for thought and for discussion. I also want to take the opportunity to share my personal point of view on the matter with you all. To me, a truly sustainable future Europe starts at the source. Boosting circular economy and fostering sustainable consumption of goods starts with the sustainability of the materials we use at the source. Here lies the key choice we have to make for the future. Do we continue to choose environment and climate harming fossil materials, or do we switch to sustainable, renewable biomaterials as often and as far as we can? I'm a farmer and a forest owner, and my family and I, we live sustainability on a daily basis. In my forest and in the forests of Europe grows what is an answer to the challenges we face together. Wood, a powerful, renewable, bio-based resource. The European Parliament's own initiative report on circular economy emphasizes the potential of a sustainable forest-based sector, of a sustainable bioeconomy for the future. The concepts of bioeconomy and circular economy go hand in hand. With the natural renewable resources we grow in Europe forests and European land, we can improve circularity by the replacement of fossil materials with renewable bio-based materials. We have an increasing amount of material entering our economy in form of products every single day, and we need to ensure sustainability for these products starting at the source. An increasing demand of renewable biomaterials calls for a sustainable management of our natural resources, especially forests. If we take the Green Deal seriously, we cannot allow further fossil CO2 to pollute our atmosphere. Fossil times must come to an end at last. And without woody biomass, a real transition to a greener Europe isn't possible. This is why I'm a strong supporter of sustainable forest management, as we practice it in my home country, Austria, and also other European countries since generations. Wood is among the most important raw materials we have in the EU. This is because sustainable forest management is already well implemented in the European countries. Sustainable forest management is our strength and has to be powered further and not weakened by one-sided and closed-minded policies. It is our duty to use the EU's great potential to tackle environmental and social challenges, such as mitigating climate change, boosting sustainability and resource efficiency, while parallel to that maintaining European competitiveness and job creation. A strong, sustainable forest-based sector and a strong, sustainable bioeconomy play a significant role in the transition to a circular economy. They play a significant role to fulfill our vision of the European Green Deal. So a loud and clear no to environment and climate harming fossil materials, and a loud and clear yes for me to sustainability and renewable bioresources. This is what the European citizens expect and also what they deserve. So it's our responsibility as delegates of the European Parliament, as the voice of the European citizens, to ensure that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Smith-Bauer. Thank you for emphasizing sustainable sourcing and defossilization. I will call the next honorable member of the European Parliament, Mr. Asger Christensen, who is from Renew Europe Group, and he serves on the Committee of Agriculture and Rural Development and is dedicated to ensuring an ambitious and sustainable green transition of the agricultural sector. Mr. Christensen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you see me also? Yes, now it's coming. Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to this great meeting today. As you maybe know, I'm I'm dairy farmer from Denmark, and in my herds we have 650 dairy cows. When I go home on my farm, I think about how can I make the politics for the better sustainability and better circular and better CO2 and also farm to. When I go stay here in Brussels, so I think how is the politics works on the life on my farm, and then the politics we are making here in Brussels. So new Green Deal, farm to fork, circular economy, and methane strategy and biodiversity. It's 5 topic that is very, very important for the
Okay. Mr. Christensen, we can't hear you very well. I think you might be muted.
It's can you hear me better now?
Yes, now we can. Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay. So I have 2 AirPods now, so maybe therefore. And my ambition is also to guarantee a high quality of food supply in the future, and the same reduce the emission from the agriculture and the strengthen the biodiversity also. Maybe it's a sound to a bit ambitious, but I believe it's possible. To reach our common climate and biodiversity goals, we need to use all the tools, such, for example, bioeconomy, and new breeding technique, and maybe also DMO. I want the technology that is most effective, not the most politically correct technology. That just makes sense to me. I was Renew's shadow rapporteur of the new circular economy plan, so I know that it's very, very important and interesting agenda. And now I'm also I've been a rapporteur of the farm to fork strategy. It's a very important strategy, and I will set the farm to fork for the food and agriculture sector for many years to come. And one of my key priorities of farm to fork is circular bioeconomy. The strategy already mentioned the potential in circular bioeconomy, and I support it. And I believe that the development of the circular bioeconomy is important for the farmers and the society also. I think it will be a new green business case for European farmers and also for the countryside. This is also a very important point for me as a rapporteur of the methane strategy. We should focus on the reusing of all our bio-waste in society and also all our bio-waste in the agriculture sector. It will give a new economy, but it will also, and we will also could use all our waste to renewable energy. It's very, very important if we want to be climate neutrality in 2050. As it's one of our goals to be climate neutrality in 2050. I believe that the new technology will play the biggest role in the green transition. That's why it is frustrates me every time outdated and repeat legislation stand in the way of our new green technologies. One of my goals in European Parliament is to make legislation flexible, but I cannot guarantee that there will be success, but I'll work for it. If we not do that, so I'm very afraid about US will take the leadership on the new bio things. So we must keep on and work very hard for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christensen. And indeed, the question is also about the European bioeconomy remaining competitive. And also, thank you very much for making the link once again with the Farm to Fork strategy and climate neutrality. Next, we have Ms. Ulrike Müller, who is a member of the European Parliament for the Renew Europe group, currently in her second term in the European Parliament, and is serving the Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development, and is a founding member of the European College for Equal Opportunities. Ms. Müller, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I want to thank my colleague Franc Bogovič and the Intergroup Secretariat for organizing this event. And thanks to the speakers for their interesting presentations. During this mandate, we are working on forming a very ambitious climate protection framework in Europe. I firmly believe that we want to succeed. What we have to consider two important principles. First, the high level of emission reduction and the targets of net neutrality by 2050 require a rapid and deep transformation of all sectors. It is clear that we are heavily depending on innovation. This means that our policy must be technology neutral and that we have to look at all available pathways. Second, moving toward more climate efficiency must become an economic opportunity. This is not only true for our own European economic sectors. With our climate ambition, we are global frontrunners. We must demonstrate that climate ambitions can be a growth model, so that other parts of the world will follow. To me, it's clear that the bioeconomy is an essential piece of the complicated puzzle. The bioeconomy ticks many important boxes. It allows not only to replace fossil-based products by renewables that offer long-term carbon storage, thereby not only contributing to emissions reduction, but even to sequestrations. It also allows value creation from residues and byproducts that otherwise would be considered waste. As you know, we currently are working on the new CIP and on the Farm to Fork biodiversity strategy. I am one of the rapporteurs. We know that sustainability requirements for farmers and foresters are becoming even more strict. These requirements will increase the costs of production without at the same time automatically allowing for higher commodity prices. For me, one of the big questions is how more sustainable practices can become investments that pay off for primary producers in the end. creating additional outlets and pathways for a high added value products such as construction and other materials, textiles, but also fuels will be an important part of the answer. Farmers not only can profit by supplying raw materials. Through cooperatives, they can be a part of the next steps of the value chain. This creates high quality business and employment opportunities in rural areas. We have many initiatives and pieces of legislation in the pipeline during this mandate, making sure that the bioeconomy can unfold this full potential for protecting climate, becoming more sustainable, and also create values will be one of my priorities. I'm looking forward to follow up and cooperate to achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Müller, and thank you very much for also making the link with the biodiversity strategy, but also to talk about once again on the reusing residues for the products. Thank you for that. I would like to call our last MEP speaker, please. So Eero Heinäluoma, who is a member of the European Parliament for the SD, so Social and Democrat, former chairman of the Finnish Social Democratic Party. Mr. Heinäluoma was the Minister of Finance in Finland from 2005 to 2007. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and many thanks for our host and all the organizers for making this event possible, and thank you for the speakers for the really interesting remarks. I have 3 comments in my mind. First, on the EU policy framework, then on the link between bioeconomy and jobs, and thirdly, bioeconomy and strategic autonomy of European Union. Firstly, on the EU policy framework, I must say that I have to agree with some of the speakers that perhaps the circular bioeconomy is not enough present in the EU green transition policy framework, and it is really the important link in the EU green transition policy framework. The Green Deal is an excellent concept, and it's wonderful to see how largely it has been accepted in the Parliament and in the societies in European Union. But it doesn't see enough potential of the bioeconomy in the writings as they are now. There isn't real reference to the EU bioeconomy strategy from 2018, and I have to say that perhaps we are good at promoting renewable energy, but not so good in promoting renewable products. In general, it seems that forests are seen from a quite narrow perspective. We need a more balanced approach at the EU level, which recognizes forests not only as carbon sinks and source for biodiversity, but also for other benefits they provide to society, such as economic and social benefits, as has been said earlier. Therefore, I believe it's essential that upcoming update of EU's industrial strategy recognizes the potential of the forest-based industries and makes a reference to the EU bioeconomy strategy 2018. The industrial strategy is the cornerstone for delivering the Green Deal and a just climate transition. And as mentioned by the speakers, the Green Deal goals on climate neutrality and resource efficiency cannot be achieved without including bio-based solutions. So my second point is about jobs. It is crucial that we think about high quality employment and jobs in relation to the transition. With the decrease of activity in the energy and industrial sectors dependent on fossil fuels, hundreds of thousands of European jobs will be phased out in the next decades. However, the transition does not automatically create new jobs in those sectors or local areas of regions which are most impacted. Advancing a sustainable bioeconomy has huge potential and can play a very positive and important role in creating those new high-quality jobs. However, these new very important jobs will not materialize if the EU policy framework does not support advancing a sustainable and circular bioeconomy. The industry estimates that 1 million jobs could be created by 2030 in the bio-based industry sector, and that is a huge possibility. My final point is about bioeconomy and strategic autonomy of European Union. The EU is focusing a lot on strategic autonomy concept. We are talking about making sure that we have strategic raw materials, European supply chains, capacity, energy, technology, etc. in Europe to retain our competitiveness. The bioeconomy can also contribute to our strategic autonomy. Wood-based raw materials and products sourced from sustainably managed European forests safeguard Europe's strategic autonomy in the green transition. So we need to reduce dependence on non-renewable, unsustainable raw materials, whether sourced domestically or from abroad. Bioeconomy, especially forest-based bioeconomy, mainly uses raw materials that are produced in Europe, with local value chains creating value across society. So it's important to acknowledge that European renewable raw materials are a solid foundation for a more resilient EU economy. Thank you, and I'm ready to listen to your viewpoints.
Thank you very much, and thank you for highlighting that EU-sourced raw materials will be the cornerstone of this bioeconomy. I believe, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for our Q&A session. And I was actually going to remind you to send questions, and then we got so many questions that I think we will have enough material to last us for maybe 2 sessions or 2 intergroup events. So maybe we can start, I will start with one opening question, and then we run straight to the questions you have kindly sent to us. And the question is actually for our host, MEP, Mr. Franc Bogovič. You have mentioned, you mentioned in the beginning about the bioeconomy creating new jobs, and this has actually been mentioned by previous speakers, including Mr. Bell. Oh, by the way, the questions for the Commission will be answered by Mr. Misiga, who has kindly offered his time for this. Can you tell us a little bit more about the role of the bioeconomy in boosting high-quality jobs in rural areas, Mr. Bogovič?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. I mentioned also long-term vision for rural areas, and inside this long-term vision for rural areas, it's necessary to have this holistic approach how we can ensure quality jobs in rural areas. For sure, it's not enough that we count on basic agriculture and forest production. We saw in COVID crisis that first of all, we need very good connectivity, broadband network and other things that we can also ensure jobs in other sectors, like long-term care for older people, like in energy sector in different ways, tourism, other things. And one very important branch of these opportunities is also bioeconomy. And what is important that usually if we, as we heard through research, innovation in connection with industry, and for sure, as it was mentioned, with owners of agricultural land, forest owners, we can create this value chain inside which it's very, very important that we have these SME companies in these sectors or bigger companies which ensure this chain in jobs. So I think that for the future it will be very important that we take care about these jobs in rural areas. Otherwise, as we see in many areas around Europe, in these areas will stay only older people, and later it will be empty area. So I think that it's necessary to think about everything. Also, it's for sure it's necessary to think how we can live together with people who are not involved in agriculture or forest sector, but they live in rural areas. It's necessary that we also build the trust, that we create this short value chain to connect, for example, in agriculture production, consumers and producers. And in these cases, I see opportunities in rural areas. So without clear strategies, without support in these rural areas, which start with basic infrastructure, cultural infrastructure, school infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, and then it's possible to create these jobs also in bio-based sector. And it's essential, and as it was said, it's necessary that we respect each other and that we think about this, as it was said, that there are limits. We cannot solve everything with bio-based industry, but we can do a lot, and I'm sure that it's the right time that we will not stay at the same place it was in one question last 10 years. Next 10 years must be much more successful in this. And here, as I said, it's also very, very important that we promote these products, that perhaps we think also about taxation, if it's possible, because sometimes we spoke about, also you mentioned renewable energy, and if we compare these things, people must buy renewable energy as mix in their energy. Here, these products, like we have, for example, organic farming, people choose if they buy this or not. Also for, as you said, renewable materials, renewable products. I think it's a lot of to do, from labeling, for promoting, through education, and at the end of the day, that also consumer will use and take these materials when they will have a choose between different materials. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bogovič. Very comprehensive answer. And now we go to the Q&A part. And I believe we have one question, which I think is for Mr. Misiga. So yesterday in an event on the bioeconomy, Deputy Director General Joanna Drake told that the Commission intended to develop sustainability guidelines for the bioeconomy by next year. Can you tell us a little bit more about this, when the Renewable Energy Directive, the taxonomy, and the other such policy initiatives already tend to define and frame sustainability in different ways? Mr. Misiga, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. I have not heard Mrs. Drake, so I don't know exactly what she meant. I will definitely inquire after this meeting, but I think the question is about potential incoherence between different sustainability requirements, and I agree that it is very important to avoid such incoherence. And to be honest, I don't see it. So we will definitely try to avoid it if there is such a risk. But at the moment, the sustainability criteria that we see are coherent. And maybe what the person who asked this question refers to, for example, is the difference between for example, sustainability requirements in the Renewable Energy Directive and the new draft taxonomy on climate mitigation. Because there's a difference, but we have to understand that these are different instruments. There are regulatory instruments, minimum requirements, and there may be other instruments that set advanced requirements because they have different role. We have this kind of differentiated requirements in many other policy fields. And for example, also in the field of circular economy, one instrument that may be used is the Eco Design Directive. And Eco Design Directive may set the minimum requirements, but there are also other instruments, labeling instruments that set advanced requirements. So it is about pushing and pulling market towards better performance. And so a taxonomy on finance that is about setting performance criteria or benchmarks of performance for investments may be different from minimum regulatory requirements. So I would, if this answer is not sufficient for the person who asked this question, I would be happy to and learn if this person identified such incoherence. It would be very interesting to know about it. I hope this answers the questions. Thank you.
I think it was a very tricky question, Mr. Misiga, and I think you gave a comprehensive answer, and I'm sure whoever asked it will be able to go back to you about the different sustainability criteria. Thank you. The next question that we have is for, let me just quickly check. Actually, we have a question about textiles, and we have a question about, let's take a look. It is for all the members of the parliament that spoke. So it's a little bit about is there a link between the roadmap towards the sustainable textile strategy? Because there is a focus on textile recycling, which is quite important, but there should also be a focus on the sustainability that can result from switching to alternative textile fibers, such as bio-based ones. Will the European Parliament redress this by proposing to address textile in a holistic manner? We are running short of time, so one member of the Parliament as well replying would also be sufficient. Any takers? Okay. No one for textiles. Well, then we have to continue, I'm afraid. So we have a question to Mr. Luc Bas. Oh, sorry. Mr. Hirnenroom, if you want to go ahead, please do.
I'm not a specialist, and I suppose this is the same thing concerning all of us MEPs, but I have to say that this is a very relevant point, and I suppose that this is more for the possibilities or for those MEPs who are working in the industrial committee, because when we are preparing the industrial strategy, this is worth of doing. So I suppose that mainly MEPs will be in favor of this idea, but the right place to make it sure that it will happen is when we are handling the industrial strategy. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So the right place to handle this will be in the industrial strategy. So that's good to mention. Thank you. Mr. Vas, I think the next question is indeed yours. And I don't know if you've already seen it, but it says you referred to a new accounting model being developed by the committee. Could you elaborate on this? And is this related to natural capital accounting?
Yes, yes, it definitely is, of course. And as I mentioned it earlier, if you need to have investment models or return on investment or business models that, of course, can also benefit the rural area, because I agree that it is sad to see that there is this land abandonment often happening. And so you need a business case for doing things differently. And if you are managing your land in a way that it is going to produce ecosystem services, then you need to have a stable framework in which you will be rewarded for doing so. So in that sense, that natural capital accounting is vital, but until recently, this has been very much a academic discussion. And So now we are seeing that this is going faster. Businesses themselves get interested. Governments understand there is a level playing field needed for natural capital accounting, always with the safeguard of not commodifying nature, because that is, of course, a risk. It is not just creating a market of nature. That's also a risk, and ICN is very aware and watching carefully. And so finally, I put a link already in the chat box or in the Q&A where people can actually watch it. The UN, in its statistical units, has recently agreed a framework for natural capital accounting that was very much supported by the European Commission, both with funding, I think, and also with expertise. And the following step that was announced recently, a few days ago, is that this will be proposed now also as the basis for a framework in the economic accounting in Europe, in the statistics unit, and to make sure that there is a level playing field. So that would give the whole bioeconomy a very different and extra dimension. If I may, because this is my last intervention, I will have to leave you soon, unfortunately. There was another question that I saw in the Q&A that was interesting on the third countries. And I think we always have to remind ourselves about what we can do in Europe, and that can look often quite good because we have good CO2 emission reduction targets and achievements in Europe. We are quite good on environmental performance compared to some other countries, but there is a lot to improve. And of course, nature and biodiversity are still under high pressure from agriculture. But we cannot divert the effects of our consumption into other countries. And I think that's a very fair question. So if we would measure the effects of our consumption into our environmental accounts, then we would be looking much worse. And so I think it's also an element of concern for those that produce the biomaterial in Europe, that not unsustainable biomaterial then enters into Europe, which we can understand and needs careful consideration. And then maybe finally, just to jump to the textiles question, because you didn't get a lot of responses there. I don't think there's only one place to discuss this. So the industrial committee, that's good if they want to do it. I think bioeconomy is discussed there as well. But textiles are key in the whole plastic soup problem. And I needed to address this because, of course, plastic or not the nylon clothing or the natural clothing, if done in a smart way, can be part of the solution of avoiding the fine particles from textiles, the fine microplastics that we wash off in massive scale. And the IUCN report has mentioned this earlier. The biggest sources of microplastics are tires and clothing. And so that can be another part where the bioeconomy can play a role. So I wouldn't isolate it in the industries debate.
I think it was great that you answered 2 questions, and actually you answered 3 now that I think about it. And you just made the link with the microplastics, single-use plastics directive. Something told me that this would come up as well. Thank you very much. Now we have a question. We have 2 questions that are linked. Okay, Mr. Misiga, I think you have one more question for you if you will take it. How to incentivize the use of renewable over fossil-based raw materials? And could this be taken up in the framework of the Green Claims Initiative?
Yes, and I think that there was a related question about demand-driven policy. I think that a number of instruments could be used, and indeed within the Green Claim Initiative, it's possible to conceive instruments that would that would inform consumer about the environmental performance of products and services, and this may actually such information can provide useful information to consumers and can drive demand for such products, and consequently this can drive use of bio-based materials. But I have to mention that we have to also think about what is environmental performance of bio-based products and how to measure it. And we know, for example, that we have a very large scale of performance of bio-based products. So it is important to set benchmarks of performance. When we look, for example, to climate aspects and carbon emissions. So when we do life cycle assessment, we see bio-based products that have excellent performance, and we have bio-based products that actually cause more carbon emissions than comparable fossil-based products. So it is not automatic that bio-based products have to be better from climate perspective. This product must be designed and produced and sourced in such a way that it results in better performance. And such products should be rewarded. One of the speakers, for example, mentioned public procurement and this kind of demand side instruments. But we need also a supply side, and there are many initiatives in that respect. I work for DG RTD, so our research and innovation program, it actually supports research in new materials. We support also deployment of these materials through different kind of demonstration and close to market activities. So there should be instruments on both sides, but I think that it is important to understand that we have to support, whether on demand side or supply side, we have to support bio-based products that are truly better from environmental perspective, from life cycle perspective than fossil-based products. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again, Mr. Misiga. And I think I believe you have also made the link with life cycle assessment and potentially the product environmental footprint, if I understood correctly. Yes, okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Let me quickly check the time and see if we've got time for one more question. We do? Excellent. Just let's take a look. Okay, so we actually have another. Yes, we have another question, and it is towards the Commission once again. But I believe that I have asked already a lot of questions to Mr. Misiga, but maybe we could have a question. Oh, you want to take the question, Mr. Misiga? Okay, then how do you see the role of the Commission's work in sustainable finance and taxonomy in driving the bioeconomy forward? This was the question.
Yes, I believe that this is very important work because basically the taxonomy helps to direct investment in activities that are sustainable. And there will be 4 types of taxonomies, each focusing on different environmental aspects. So the first one that is almost ready and that is discussed by stakeholders at the moment is about climate mitigation and adaptation. So the taxonomy basically identifies economic activities that can be considered as contributing significantly to climate mitigation and climate adaptation. And for example, what was achieved was that certain economic activities, bio-based industrial activities or bio-based industrial sectors were included in this taxonomy. So it is recognized that, for example, production of bio-based plastics or bio-based chemicals can contribute to climate mitigation. Of course, there are technical screening criteria, or in other words, certain performance criteria or performance benchmarks that must be met before such economic activity can be considered as significantly contributing. And there may be a discussion, what is this benchmark? And what impact this benchmark will have on the industry. And I know that it is very controversial, but this is once we agree, all stakeholders, what is the level of performance, then it will be a very important instrument for financial institutions because they will be able to identify those projects and economic activities where investment will support sustainable activities. So I believe that the role is very important, and actually the benchmarks developed within the taxonomy can maybe used also in other policy initiatives, whether it is at EU level, it may be this level of performance can be linked to national incentives or other type of incentives, be it fiscal or another type of incentives. It can be used for any other support that can be provided by different actors. If this performance benchmark is understood and communicated in proper way, then it can be used also as information to general public. This is the level of performance that can be considered as contributing to sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there is definitely multiple uses to these benchmarks, and this is of course something that is to be further discussed. I believe there is one speaker that was left without a question, and we can't let that happen. So Claire, the last question is for you, and then we wrap up. What is the relation?
Oh my God, I escaped there.
You have not escaped, not with me around, sorry. but it's a relatively easy one, Claire. So can you please summarize what you believe is the relation between the bioeconomy and the circular economy? If you had one phrase, what would you say?
Oh my goodness, that's the really tricky one as well, because it's where I put the really big picture up at the start. It's hard to map them on each other directly, but I think what I want to see is the bioeconomy is not single-use materials for a bio-based thing. I want bio-based materials to sit inside a circular pattern of use and renewal. It's not replacing tin cans to put your food in. However, it is bringing in an element of bio-based materials into materials that might be used in car manufacturing or other things like that. And all of these things need to remain circular. So for me, that's the main thing. It's not going back to the days where you would grow a field full of stuff and then it would become a biofuel and that was the end of its use. It's putting it into a circular economy where materials themselves will be reused and recycled, so they themselves stay circular within active economic and societal use.
Thank you very much, Claire, for summarizing. And I believe we will remember that picture. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to now slowly wrap up, and I would like to invite Mr. Bogovič back again for the closing remarks.
Thank you. Do you hear me? Oh, no, it's okay. Thank you very much. Sorry for this. Thanks for all this panel. Thanks for everything what was done, what was said this afternoon. If I summarize a little bit, for sure we heard that circular economy and bio-based industry are part of the solution. So this is the first thing what is very important. And it must be done on the right manner. It means that we speak about many of these strategies, which are, I can say, also the rule of our behavior for the future. It means what was also very important, what was done, what was said today. We know that it's necessary to stop to use the fossil-based material, but on another side, we must be clear and also honest to nature and to say that there are limits. There are limits also in forests. There are limits in agriculture. For sure, it's possible to make business from this in these areas, and these are our basic businesses in rural areas. But as we said, There are some rules also in common agriculture policy. We know the direction of common agriculture policy, and if we respect all these things, we go in the right direction. What was also said, it's very important that we work together and collaborate on all value chain. It's important. There are many traditional jobs, but we count also on new jobs, and to ensure these jobs, it's necessary to collaborate and start with research innovation. New materials, other things are big opportunity. It's important that industry is involved as soon as possible because the jobs are there. It's also very important that all this works together in collaboration with landowners. It means with farmers and agriculture. But on the other hand, it's very important. There is very important role of consumers. Perhaps in this we didn't do so much in the past as on others. So I think things we didn't spoke a lot today about labeling, about promoting of these materials. I think it's very important that if we will work in hand by consumers, it will be easier then to also to produce these materials and also get benefits from all in the value chain from these materials. What is very important is also, and we speak a lot about this, about fair and honest relation in value chain. In agriculture, this is a specific topic, and I think that sometimes really the primary producers are in the worst position, and here it will be very important that all people who are in this value chain can also survive from their businesses, and sometimes in basic production is not so easy. So I think that in front of us there are many work, and for sure we speak in the right time. We will start to get also these operational programs from states, and if we speak about all this big money inside multi-annual framework, inside recovery and resilience fund, it is necessary, and this is big. It will be conditioned that it is in line with these priorities: green, digital, and resilient Europe. So thanks a lot to all participants that you followed this webinar. I recognize that many of them followed also yesterday event. So thanks a lot. Thanks to all panelists for their great presentations. Thanks also to my colleagues. We saw there are between members of European Parliament also many farmers. I am also one of them, so that we know also from the practical way how it works on the ground. And thanks, Anna, for your great moderation, and thanks to Regine and to all from Intergroup Secretariat for organizing this event.
Okay.
Thanks, and I wish you a nice afternoon to everybody.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for this very intense debate. Thank you all very much, and of course to Mr. Bogovič for taking the lead in today's webinar. It's been a real pleasure having this online event with you. Speakers, you can of course open up your cameras, it's totally fine. And note that all PowerPoints of the speakers as well as the webinar recording will be made available as of tomorrow on the page of the Intergroup. I am very much looking forward to continuing this discussion in the future ahead. I believe that we have now established with this event that it's the right time to talk about the bioeconomy and about its role in the circular economy, and that there is a link. So this is really good news, and it will be part of the European resilience. So until then, stay safe and all the best. Thank you very much. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Goodbye. Thank you. Bye bye.